Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we're going to be talking about which team you should root for in the United Football League. Now, if you were a USFL or XFL fan the past year or two, you probably already have a team you like. But what if your team ended up getting shelved? What if you were a Maulers fan? What if you were a Seattle Sea Dragons fan? Or what if you're just new to spring football now? Well, I'll be going over all 8 teams and giving you basically an NFL kind of counterpart team, as well as talk about other reasons to why you might like this team. Now, naturally, I'm not going to talk about the geographical locations, and the teams I'm picking to compare are the overall team, not where they are. Because naturally, yes, if you live in Dallas or Arlington, you're probably going to gravitate towards being a Renegades fan. Same if you're living in Detroit or Michigan, you're going to be a Michigan Panthers fan. They play in Detroit, they're a Michigan team. So, naturally, I'm not going to be talking about the geographical stuff. We're just going to be talking about the team as a whole. Without further ado, let's get started with the Birmingham Stallions. And, of course, their NFL similar team or teams is the Chiefs. I mean, come on. If you're a Chiefs fan, you're a fan of winning. You're a fan of seeing your team just dominate the league. And even in this past season, when they didn't look super dominant, they still turned it up in the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. The Birmingham Stallions are the equivalent of that. The Stallions, on paper, are still the best team in spring football. And in all honesty, since the USFL came back in 2022, there's been maybe 4 weeks where we didn't view them as the best team in all of spring football. This team basically since about week 5 this past season till now has been the best team. They ended up losing a bunch of players due to injury week 1 of the season this past year, still won the title. They ended up losing a bunch of guys in free agency, still were the best team, because they also gained a bunch of great talent in free agency. They had an awesome dispersal draft, and on paper, they still are clearly the best team in the entire league, and it's not even close. The fact is, this team not making it to the championship game, barring a super huge amount of injuries, would be a massive shock to fans. So if you're a fan of the Chiefs and winning, they're your team. The fact is, the Stallions have an insanely great coach, and they've been able to win with basically anyone. They've had both Bo Scarborough and CJ Maribel be their top running back. They've had both Jamar Smith and Alex Mou be their top quarterback. They've had basically a slew of starting wide receivers due to injuries and Victor Bolden leaving this in 2022, and they're still great. And this team just got back one of its best defensive players in DeMarcus Gates a couple weeks ago. The fact is, the Stallions, if you want to root for a team that has the best shot at winning the title, the Stallions are the team for you. They are the winning team. They are the team to be a fan of if you like winning. Now, the next team to look at from the XFL side is going to be the Arlington Renegades, who, in an NFL similar team, is basically like the NFC South this past year. What do I mean by that? Essentially being rewarded for mediocrity. The Arlington Renegades this past season finished 4-6 in the regular season, but thanks to some teams choking, mainly the Brahmas, near the end of the season, they were able to make the playoffs thanks to kind of dumb luck. They won 4 games during the season, didn't even have to play in their Week 10 game, and could take the L because the Brahmas didn't win in Week 10, and they made the playoffs at 4-6. So, even though they weren't terrible, they really weren't that good, as there was a team that went 7-3 and missed the playoffs, and the Renegades ended up winning the championship game. So, it's very similar to how the NFC South was this past season. Basically, none of those teams are really that good, and even the Buccaneers, who ended up winning a playoff game, they really weren't good at all. They were just an okay team, got lucky because of the division they were in, won a couple games that mattered, and they made it to the playoffs and won a game. So the Renegades are very much like a wildcard team that wins the Super Bowl. They're very much like an NFC South team this past year, a team that really wasn't that good, but made the playoffs and made the most of it. They are defending champions in the XFL side of things, but if you want to be a fan of a team that you can always throw the I have a championship card out, but might not be that great this year, the Renegades are the team for you. The fact is that this is a team that, despite being a defending champ, is an underdog. They're not really a favorite to win the championship. They're not one of the top 3. So that is a bit surprising, but again, it's because this team really wasn't that great this past season. They had an insanely good Luis Perez playoff run that really helped them win the championship. So if you want a team that has a lot of question marks, but if wins the championship this year is going to be viewed as a big deal, unlike the Stallions, Renegades are the team for you. Now, going back to the USFL side of things, let's look at the Memphis Showboats, who are kind of like a hybrid between the Texans and the Rams. Okay, how? Well, think about the Rams a couple years ago. I'm not talking about this past year team. Basically, when they were trading away every single pick they had to get these superstar players, Jalen Ramsey, Matt Stafford, that kind of thing. That's basically the Showboats this offseason. The Showboats this offseason added 4 huge pieces in offense. I forgot about him early on, but Jonathan Adams is a really solid number 1 wide receiver. They added an unbelievably good tight end in Sage Surratt. Then you got Darius Victor, who's one of the best running backs in the league, and of course Case Cookus, who by a lot of people's accounts, including mine, is the best quarterback in the United Football League. At worst, he's basically third on people's lists. So they're like the Rams that they added a ton of high-end talent, but they're like the Texans in the fact that they are a very likable team. This is a team that this past season went 5-5, missed the playoffs, but looked all right. They weren't awesome, they weren't terrible, but they were a fun team to watch who, aside from two absolutely awful losses to the hands of the Stallions and Breakers, they were really good at competing in games. So the fact is, this is a team that is very likable. They are pretty low on the odds to win it as well, at like plus 800, which is really shocking. This is a team that if you want to be a fan of a team that has a lot of high upside and is going to be a fun team to watch and is pretty likable, the Showboats are your team. Now the next team to look at is going to be the St. Louis Battlehawks, who are very much like the Cowboys. In the sense that, massive fan base. There's basically three groups in that fan base that, granted, are in every fan base, but like the Battlehawks and Cowboys are very huge, and the bandwagoners who are a fan of them because they're just, the big team in terms of fan support. The realists who understand the issues of the team and what they need to get better at, and then the delusional fans that try to act like their team is just God's gift to football. The Battlehawks are very much like the Cowboys. There are some fans who understand this team does have massive weaknesses at certain key points on the offense. Then there's others who say they're clearly the best offense, and instead of using the argument of, well, they have a great quarterback and wide receivers, they say the whole offense is good when your tight end and running back room really aren't all that. And then, of course, you have the bandwagon fans who just want to support them because they get over 30,000 fans a game. The Battlehawks are also like the Cowboys in the sense that they choked the most important game of the season. Now, even though I mentioned that they went 7-3, the fact is they did not even remotely deserve a postseason berth. And there's no argument to me that actually says they did. Because in Week 9, they had a chance to all but clinch a playoff spot by beating the Seattle Sea Dragons, and they got obliterated. 30-12 is a terrible look in a key game. That's what made them miss the playoffs, not the postseason format being the way it is. But again, realist Battlehawks fans understood that, acknowledged that, hey, our team messed up in the week that mattered, we'll get them next year. Whereas delusional fans acted like they were robbed, they should have made the playoffs, which even if they did make the playoffs, they were just going to get obliterated by the defenders anyway. So, they are very much like the Cowboys. They are a fun team to watch as well. Much like the Cowboys, they're going to be a pass-heavy offense in the sense that they've got now two of the two best receivers in the league and one of the best QBs. It's going to be a fun team to watch, but yeah, the fan base is either really good fans or insanely delusional. Now, going back to the USFL side with the Houston Roughnecks, who it's pretty hard to compare a team because there's really none that are super like them, but the Steelers are pretty close. Essentially, the Roughnecks spent this offseason making their D-line basically just the best. Not even close. Their D-line is the best position group in the entire league. It's even better than the Battlehawks receiving group, which is insane to think about, but it is, and it's not close. Look, the Roughnecks, these four guys that are on this picture aren't even the only guys they added, and these aren't even the guys that they had on their roster either. In this group, you have Toby Johnson, Reggie Howard Jr., Adam Rodriguez, and Keontae Stroud, who are already four of the best D-linemen in the league. But they just re-signed Chris Odom. They got a couple other guys to join the team during the offseason. They have the best D-line in the league. Very much like the Steelers' D-line and the Steelers this past season. They're probably going to win games mainly by their running game, which the Steelers looked a lot better this year than they did the previous year with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. And they're going to rely nothing really on quarterback. The Roughnecks have the weakest quarterback room on paper at the moment, just like the Steelers had a really pitiful quarterback room. When Mason Rudolph is your best quarterback, yikes. So just like the Roughnecks and Steelers, it's going to be about the defense. Can the defense, mainly the D-line, carry your team to victory? A very unique type of style in today's day and age. Granted, a team like, the Browns are pretty comparable, but they relied a bit more on QB play than the Steelers did, so I didn't really include them. But yeah, the Roughnecks are going to be a very fun team to watch if you're a fan of defense and big plays on defense. That's your team. Now back to the XFL side, the DC Defenders, very much like the Ravens and the Bills. In a sense that they're like the Bills, that they have the craziest fan base. Might not be the biggest, but the Beer Snake, the Lemons on the field, their fan base is basically the Bills Mafia of the XFL this past season, and there's no USFL fan base that even comes close. So for the UFL, they have the most crazy fan base. But they're like the Ravens in the sense that they did kind of blow it in the postseason this past year, but mainly because their overall roster is pretty solid. There's really no weak spot, just like the Bills and Ravens. Like, this past season, they had 7 All-XFL players, and now that number shifted a bit, with guys leaving and coming back, signings. But they had the Offensive Player of the Year this past season, Jordan Ta'amu, who, according to the XFL Awards, was the best QB this past season because, again, I'm trying to eliminate this rumor. A.J. McCarron was not the league MVP. He was the league MVP to a couple news sources. And then Reggie Barlow was Coach of the Year. Essentially, just like the Ravens and Bills, this team is very loaded at basically every position. And they're very weak in only a couple. but they haven't actually succeeded in the playoffs at all. So I'm putting them as that. Now, in terms of the Michigan Panthers, the last USFL team to cover, they're very much like the Packers. Essentially, you have a running back room that a lot of people are very confident in because they've shown to be good. The Packers, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. The Michigan Panthers have two new guys in Matt Colburn and Wes Hills. But they both have a quarterback that is very unproven. Now, Jordan Love is now pretty much proven as that guy, but heading into the season, there was a lot of people who thought he was going to be really good and a lot of people that thought he would be really bad. E.J. Perry is the same thing. There's a lot of people who look at his playoff game and say he's going to be a top 3 quarterback in the league, and then people who look at his Week 10 game and say he's going to be a bottom 3 quarterback. They both have defenses that are kind of unsung, not really great, sometimes play good, sometimes Joe Barry screws it up and you get torched, but the Panthers' defense overall was a bit more consistent this past season relative to the leagues that they're in. But the Panthers are pretty close to the Packers. The Panthers are honestly a really fun team to watch if you want to see what is potentially going to happen. The fact is that they are not even remotely the favorites to win the championship or even make the playoffs. So if you want to be a fan of a team that where you really can't be disappointed, as this team going 2-8 isn't even a disappointment because their expectation is to be the worst team in the USFL conference. So if they end up being a playoff team, it's a big deal. Just like this past season, them making the playoffs was a big deal. So if you want a team like that, Panthers are yours. Then the last team to look at is the San Antonio Brahmas, who are honestly pretty close to the Cardinals. This is the toughest one to think of. But I'm going with the Cardinals because they both have a quarterback that very polarizing. Kyler Murray has shown that he can be a great quarterback, but he's also shown that he can be not that guy. Quinn Dormady is very similar to that. If you ask a guy like me, I say he's probably one of the weakest quarterbacks in the league. You ask certain other people, they'll say he has the potential to be a top 3 guy. Does he have potential? Yes. Does Kyler Murray have potential? Yes. But are they able to consistently be at that high point of their career? Kyler Murray, we thought he was going to when they were, undefeated a couple years ago, but then he, along with the rest of the team, kind of fell off, and then he had that horrid postseason game against the Rams. Quinn Dormady had a couple weeks where he looked really good, a couple that he looked awful. Brahmas ended up missing the playoffs last year, and now this year they have Dormady, who was with the Guardians this past season, who went 1-9, and just like the Cardinals, they were bottom of the league. So again, just like the Panthers with both these teams, if they don't make the playoffs, it's not a big deal because you weren't expected to. But the Brahmas have the worst odds to make the championship game, so them doing anything in regards to making the playoffs or even the championship, oh man, would be crazy. So yeah, the Brahmas are definitely that very much underdog team. But I would say the Panthers are more of an underdog in the sense that nobody really is believing in them besides Panthers fans, whereas there are certain non-Brahmas fans who think the Brahmas are going to be good. But we'll see. So overall, that'll do it for which UFL team you should root for in the United Football League. If you like this video and you like my content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Click the join button or the link down below in the description to become a member. As little as $1 a month, you will get special sneak peeks to upcoming videos a day or two in advance, and future perks that are in the works as well. As always, have a great night.